People talk about millions like they're just numbers, faces in a crowd, names that blur together, but every once in a while the universe gets quiet. And you meet someone who doesn't blend in at all, someone who changes the way you see the world. Not by being perfect, but by being real. My dream girl isn't one in a million because she's rare on paper. She's one in a million because when she's there, everything else fades. This is about why some people don't just enter your life, they become it. I didn't meet her and suddenly feel like I was complete. That's not how it happened. It was quieter than that, slower, almost unnoticeable at first. What I felt instead was this strange discomfort, like something inside me had been gently moved out of place. Not broken, just shifted. She didn't arrive to fill a gap. She arrived and made me see the gaps that had always been there. And that's when I realized this wasn't about romance in the dramatic sense. This was about honesty, the kind that doesn't raise its voice, the kind that just stands there and waits for you to stop lying to yourself. Before her, I was good at pretending I had things figured out, pretending I didn't care as deeply as I did, pretending I was okay with being half present in my own life. I wore that version of myself comfortably. It fit well enough. People accepted it. I accepted it. But when she came into my life, she didn't challenge me with words. She didn't demand change. She simply existed as herself, open, grounded, unguarded. And somehow that made my pretending feel heavier, like armor I'd forgotten I was wearing. And once you notice the weight, you can't unfeel it. She has this way of listening that doesn't interrupt your thoughts. She doesn't rush to fix things. She lets silence breathe. And in that space, I started hearing my own voice more clearly. Not the one I show the world, the quieter one. The one that admits fear before courage. The one that knows when it's tired of being strong. I'm as a silhouette of a person removing heavy armor in the soft glow of a sunrise. Being around her didn't make me want to impress her. It made me want to be real, and that's rare. That's one in a million. I started noticing how often I'd been choosing comfort over truth, how I'd learned to smooth out my edges so life would feel easier. She didn't ask me to sharpen them. She just didn't require me to dull them either. With her, I didn't have to perform being okay. I could arrive exactly as I was, even if that version was confused, uncertain, or quiet, especially quiet. And she didn't step away from that. She stayed present, not trying to brighten it, not trying to escape it, just there. And when someone can sit with you in your unfiltered state, you start to trust yourself more. Loving her has been less about fireworks and more about mirrors. She reflects things back to me I didn't know I was avoiding, the way I minimize my own needs, the way I carry responsibility like it's a debt instead of a choice, the way I sometimes disappear into my thoughts instead of sharing them. She doesn't point these things out. She lives in a way that gently exposes them. And that's harder than criticism because you can argue with criticism. You can't argue with clarity. There's a moment I remember clearly. We weren't doing anything special. No big conversation, no dramatic confession, just sitting together, the world moving quietly around us. And I realized I wasn't trying to be interesting. I wasn't editing my thoughts. I wasn't calculating my responses. I was just there, fully there. And that scared me a little because being fully present means being fully seen. And being fully seen means you don't get to hide behind the version of yourself you've rehearsed. She didn't force that moment. She made it possible. And that's the difference. She is one in a million because she doesn't fall in love with the highlight reel. She notices the pauses, the unfinished sentences, the contradictions. She understands that people are layered, sometimes messy, often unfinished. And instead of needing me to resolve myself into something neat, she allows me to be in progress. That permission changed the way I treat myself. I stopped rushing my own growth. I stopped punishing myself for not having all the answers. I started listening inward. Instead of just moving forward out of habit, being with her made me realize how often we confuse intensity with depth, loud emotions, big gestures, constant reassurance. But what she brings is depth that doesn't demand attention. It's steady, it's grounded, it doesn't disappear when things get quiet. And in that quiet, I learned how much noise I'd been carrying inside. Old expectations, old disappointments, old versions of myself that I kept dragging along because I didn't know how to let them go. She didn't tell me to release them. She showed me what it feels like to travel lighter. I think that's what makes her one in a million. Not that she changes me, but that she creates an environment where change feels image. A calm, deep lake reflecting a clear mountain peak, symbolizing depth and clarity. Natural. Where honesty isn't risky, where growth isn't forced, where love doesn't feel like something you have to earn by being better, stronger, or more impressive. With her, love feels like something you step into by being truthful, and truth has a way of rearranging things inside you. I started speaking differently around her, slower, more deliberate, less defensive. I noticed when I was about to say something just to fill the space, and I stopped. Silence wasn't awkward anymore, it was shared. That taught me something about connection. That real connection doesn't rush, it doesn't crowd you. It allows space without creating distance. And once you experience that, you start craving it everywhere else in your life. You stop tolerating shallow exchanges. You stop settling for relationships that only skim the surface. She made me ask questions I hadn't asked before, not about the future in a conventional sense, but about alignment, about whether the life I was building actually matched, and the person I was becoming, about whether my values were lived or just spoken, about whether I was brave enough to be consistent, not just passionate. These weren't questions she asked me directly. They rose naturally simply by being around someone who lives with quiet integrity. There's a strength in her that doesn't announce itself. It's not about control or certainty. It's about steadiness, about showing up the same way when no one is watching, about choosing kindness without needing credit. Watching that made me reevaluate what I considered strength in myself. I realized how often I equated strength with endurance, with pushing through, with never slowing down. She showed me that strength can also be knowing when to pause, when to feel, when to admit you don't have it all. Together, I became more honest about my fears, not because she demanded vulnerability, but because she respected it when it appeared. There's a difference. Vulnerability offered under pressure feels like exposure. Vulnerability met with patience feels like trust, and trust changes the way you speak. It changes the way you listen. It changes the way you think about love, not as something fragile, but as something spacious. She doesn't rush love. She lets it unfold. And in that unfolding, I found myself confronting parts of me I'd ignored. My tendency to self-isolate when overwhelmed. My habit of carrying things alone even when I don't need to. My fear that leaning on someone might make me weaker. She never challenged those fears directly. She simply existed as someone who could be leaned on without collapsing. And that taught me that interdependence isn't loss of self, it's expansion. Being with her feels like standing in better light, not brighter, clearer. You see yourself more accurately, flaws included. And instead of wanting to hide them, you start understanding them. Where they came from, why they formed, whether they still serve you. That clarity is uncomfortable. Image. A close-up of a person's eyes reflecting a warm, steady flame. Sometimes growth usually is, but it's also grounding. It makes you feel more rooted in who you are instead of who you're trying to be. I think love is often portrayed as something that saves you, something that lifts you out of yourself. But what I've learned is that real love brings you back to yourself. It reminds you of your own voice, your own values, your own responsibility in becoming who you want to be. She doesn't carry me, she walks beside me. And walking beside someone requires honesty about your pace, your direction, your fatigue. She is one in a million, because she doesn't need me to be anything other than present. And presence is demanding in a way nothing else is. You can fake confidence, you can fake charm, you can fake certainty. You can't fake presence for long. Presence requires you to show up as you are right now without guarantees. And choosing to do that again and again has changed how I move through the world. I started noticing how much of my life I'd been living on autopilot. Conversations half heard, moments half felt, decisions made out of momentum instead of intention. Loving her slowed me down, not in a way that stalled my life, but in a way that made it deliberate. And deliberateness brings honesty with it. You stop doing things just because you've always done them. You start asking whether they still make sense. She sees me when I'm quiet, not withdrawn. Quiet. There's a difference. Quiet is where my thoughts settle, where I process, where I recalibrate. Many people mistake that for distance. She doesn't. She understands that stillness is part of who I am, and being understood without explanation feels like relief. That relief creates space for truth, and truth creates intimacy that doesn't fade when circumstances change. I don't feel like I have to protect my rough edges around her. I don't have to soften my honesty to make it more digestible. I can speak plainly, and when you're allowed to speak plainly, you stop hiding behind cleverness. You stop disguising vulnerability as humor. You start saying what you mean and meaning what you say. She is one in a million because she doesn't compete with my solitude. She respects it. and in respecting it, she becomes part of it. That's rare. To be alone without feeling lonely. To be together without losing yourself. That balance isn't taught. It's lived. And living it with her has reshaped my understanding of connection at its core. There's no pressure to be extraordinary with her, and ironically, that's what makes everything feel extraordinary. Ordinary moments carry weight. Shared glances, unspoken understanding, the comfort of not needing to fill every second with proof of affection. Love doesn't feel like something I have to constantly maintain. It feels like something that exists because it's tended quietly. I've learned that honesty isn't just about telling the truth. It's about living it, aligning actions with values, choosing. Image two people walking side by side on a quiet, endless beach at dusk. Consistency over intensity, choosing presence over performance. She embodies that. And being close to someone who lives that way naturally encourages you to do the same. She didn't make me a better man by asking me to change. She made me a more honest one by allowing me to be seen without condition. And honesty, once it takes root, starts influencing everything. How you love, how you work, how you dream, how you calibrate your heart. That's why she's one in a million. Not because she stands out in a crowd, but because when I'm with her, I stop blending into my own life. I step forward fully. I listen more carefully. I speak more truthfully. I move more intentionally. And once you experience that kind of clarity, you can't unknow it. I used to think love had to announce itself, that if it wasn't intense, dramatic, overwhelming, then it wasn't real. I thought love was something that shook you, pulled you apart, forced you to feel everything all at once. And maybe that's how it starts for some people. Maybe that's how it's sold to us. But what I learned with her is that real love doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the strongest things in life don't raise their voice at all. With her, love doesn't crash into my life. It settles into it. It doesn't demand my attention. It earns my trust. There's no pressure to prove anything, no urgency to constantly define what we are. There's just this steady sense of being held, not physically, but emotionally. And that kind of safety changes the way you breathe. It slows your thoughts. It lets your shoulders drop. It reminds you that you don't have to be on guard all the time. I didn't realize how used I was to tension until it was gone. How normal it had felt to brace myself in relationships, to anticipate misunderstanding, to prepare for conflict even in good moments. Loving her doesn't feel like walking on unstable ground. It feels like standing somewhere solid, somewhere I don't have to constantly check myself, measure my words, or second-guess my intentions. She doesn't confuse chaos with passion. She doesn't believe love has to hurt to be deep. With her, love feels calm but not empty, quiet but not distant. There's warmth in it, a steady presence that doesn't flicker when things get hard. And that steadiness is what makes it rare. Anyone can be intense when things are easy. Not everyone can remain gentle when things are complicated. There's a kind of safety that comes from knowing your emotions won't be used against you later, from knowing that vulnerability isn't ammunition. With her, I don't hesitate before sharing what I feel. I don't rehearse my honesty. I don't water it down, because I know it will be met with care, not judgment, with understanding, not defensiveness. And that changes how deeply you're willing to open up. Love with her doesn't feel like a performance. There's no audience, no scorecard, no constant need to impress. Image a peaceful, warm interior of a home with a lit fireplace and 2 empty chairs. I don't have to show up as the strongest version of myself every day. I can show up tired, uncertain, quiet, and that version is just as welcome. That acceptance doesn't make me complacent. It makes me grounded. It gives me room to grow without fear of being left behind while I do. She doesn't raise her voice to be heard. She doesn't need to dominate a moment to own it. Her presence speaks in consistency in the way she shows up when she says she will, and the way she listens without interrupting, in the way she responds instead of reacting. That kind of emotional maturity doesn't draw attention to itself, but once you experience it, it's impossible to ignore. I've learned that safety and love isn't about control. It's about trust. Trust that silence won't be misunderstood. Trust that space won't be mistaken for distance. Trust that disagreement doesn't mean disconnection. With her, conflict doesn't feel like a threat. It feels like a conversation, something to move through, not something to survive. There's no fear of being replaced, dismissed, or diminished. Not because she reassures me constantly, but because her actions are consistent. Safety like that doesn't come from words repeated over and over. It comes from alignment, from knowing that what someone says and what they do belong to the same truth. Being with her taught me how exhausting loud love can be. The kind that thrives on highs and crashes on lows. The kind that mistakes volatility for depth. I didn't know how much energy I was spending managing emotions instead of experiencing them. With her, love doesn't drain me. It restores me. It feels like a place I can return to, not a storm I have to navigate. She doesn't need to test love to confirm it's real. There are no games, no intentional distance, no emotional puzzles to solve. What you see is what you get, and that clarity creates peace. Peace that allows affection to grow naturally, instead of being forced by fear of loss. I find myself softer with her, not weaker, softer, more patient, more attentive, less reactive, and I know that's because I don't feel like I'm constantly defending my place in her life. Safety creates room for kindness, for humor that isn't masking insecurity, for affection that doesn't come with conditions. She makes love feel human again, not dramatic, not cinematic, just real. The kind of love that exists in shared routines, in small check-ins, in understanding looks, in being able to sit together without needing to fill the space. That kind of connection doesn't look impressive from the outside, but it's unshakable from within. There's comfort in knowing that my emotions won't overwhelm her, that I don't have to downplay how I feel to keep the peace. She doesn't fear emotional depth, she meets it calmly, and being met calmly in moments of intensity teaches you how to regulate yourself, how to speak. Image, a close-up of two hands resting near each other on a table, not touching but close. Without escalating, how to feel without losing control. She is one in a million because she doesn't make love something I have to survive. She makes it something I can live inside of freely, safely, honestly. And that kind of love doesn't burn fast or fade quickly. It stays, it settles. It becomes part of the foundation you stand on. With her, I'm not afraid of the quiet moments. I don't interpret stillness as loss of interest. I don't read into pauses. I trust them because I trust her. And trust is what turns affection into something lasting. Love with her doesn't feel like tension pulling tight. It feels like balance, like knowing that even when things shift, the ground beneath us remains steady. And that steadiness is what allows love to deepen without fear, to grow without urgency, to exist without noise. She is one in a million because she shows me that love doesn't need to be loud to be real. Sometimes the most meaningful connections are the ones that lower your heart rate instead of raising it. The ones that make you feel safe enough to be exactly who you are without bracing for impact.